What's up, PvP enjoyers? We're going to break down some fights and we're going to discuss and look at some of the key lessons from those fights. Our focus today will be what I consider the strongest spell in all of solo PvP. In a second, it will become clear to you which two items I am referring to, but let's first watch this fight. This fight starts extremely well for my opponent. He hits both his W and his E, and then correctly uses his Infernal Shield to prevent me from really fighting back. I use my E and we are now in an interesting situation. The Carving Sword has a purge, which gives me two options. Number one is to use my Inferno to try and brawl with him as he's catching up. If my Inferno gets purged by his Fiendcal, then I can use my boots and my cripple to try to disengage and completely reset the fight. My other option is to go about it in reverse, to use my boots to create space and potentially disengage, and if he uses his Fiendcal to remove my boots, then turn and use both my Inferno Shield and cripple in order to try to win the brawl. If this makes sense, perfect. If not, don't worry, we will come back to this and talk about the bigger lesson here. For now, let's see what actually happens. I use my boots, but I take a terrible sidestep and the worst possible thing happens. He catches me with his W. Against an experienced carving player, this mistake should cost me my life. But he decides to still use his purge to get rid of my boots. This is a big mistake from him. He should have just walked into range for his Q, and he knows that his E and boots are both ready soon, so he will have no problem catching up to me. But as you remember, my plan was clear. If he purges my boots, I will use my Inferno Shield and cripple to brawl. So I turn, and despite my mistakes, I'm able to convincingly win this trade. After that, it's not difficult to catch up to him and finish the job. And this brings us to our first big lesson. If your opponent has a purge, you need to force them into making a choice. The worst possible thing that you can do against a purge is to use several important spells at the same time to allow them to purge all of them. And this doesn't just apply to your chest armor or your boots, but also to other types of buffs. In this old clip, I just need to trade with my enemy until my W and E are ready, and then I can execute them. If they purge my stacks to prevent this, I can then use my Inferno to still continue brawling. Instead, I make a mistake and give my opponent a perfect purge when they get rid of my Inferno as well as the 3 spear stacks that I needed. So the secret is out. I think that purge is the strongest spell in solo PvP in Albion, and consequently the Helmet of Valor and Fiendcal are the 2 strongest items. This does not mean that they are the best items for every build or every situation, but I think Purge is the most versatile spell that can completely define the way a fight goes in the mists. Let me know in the comments if you agree, or if you disagree, tell me what items or spells do you think are better for solo PvP. I am genuinely curious to hear your opinions and get potential ideas for future videos. Let's keep going. Next we have another Carving Sword with a Fiendcal. Just like before, I need to force him into a choice. I need to make sure that he cannot purge too many important things at once. The Carving will most likely want to purge either my Inferno or my boots. And just like before, his decision will have a clear impact on how the fight goes. If he chooses to purge my boots, it's more likely that we will brawl because I will have less kiting and spacing tools. If he chooses to purge my Inferno, it's more likely that I will try to kite him because I will not be as strong at brawling. So if you are a carving player or you just simply have a purge, then you can start thinking about how your decision what to purge starts affecting the fight. Did you notice what he purged in this fight? He decides not to purge my Inferno Shield and I win the first brawl. We both make a pretty big mistake here. I create too much space with my boots and he decides to purge them. He is limiting my mobility at the cost of making it more difficult for him to win the next brawl. If he was conscious of the decision he made, he would keep spacing and trying to kite me until his helmet is ready again. But he turns around for another brawl, which I predictably win because I get good value from my Stalker hood and his Fiend Cowl is still on cooldown. Which leads us to lesson number 2. This is from the perspective of the person who has a purge. If you are not sure that you will win the brawl, then use your purge in order to win the brawl. Prioritize using your purge to get rid of your enemy's defensives, or if they're using a weapon with stacks, potentially their stacks. If, however, you know that you will brawl better, then use your purge against your enemy's kiting tools so as to force more brawls and more trades during the fight. Good examples of this are when you're fighting against bows or frost staffs. Against those weapons you will pretty much always be the better brawler. In that case, you should use your purge to get rid of your enemy's kiting tools in order to force the brawl that you will anyway win. We will come back to this later for more important lessons, but now let's look at the fight. In this fight we are dealing with a very good player who almost killed me already in this mist. We go for a rematch and he has a Helmet of Valor, so he will have to choose when and what to purge. By the way, as a small side note, do you know why he's walking away from me right now? The reason is that he engaged onto me with his Shadow Edge, and without his E, he cannot really win the brawl. But he knows that the moment he clicks E, I will instantly use my E to get out from under him and try to kite out his E duration. His counter to that is to Shadow Edge to catch me, so while his Shadow Edge is on cooldown, he does not want to be close to me. So he very correctly waits out his cooldown and then comes back for the brawl. Everything goes very predictably. He uses his E, I E out, he catches me with Shadow Edge, and now I'm in a little bit of a trouble. Just like before, I need to choose whether to use Inferno that he will purge or to use Boots that he might purge. I use Boots in hopes that he will act like the carving swords from before, but this player is smart and is not super worried that I will get away. He catches up to me and his finger is on the button ready to purge my Inferno as soon as I use it. In this situation, my usage of the Inferno actually becomes a bit of a mistake, because just like that short clip I showed you before, he ends up purging my stacks together with Inferno. I would have been better off just brawling with him with 3 spear stacks without using Inferno. Okay, let's go back to the big question of what to purge, or what do you want your opponent to purge? We need to consider one additional factor here, and that is the risk that our decision will carry. If you use your purge on an enemy's defensive in order to win the brawl, then it is more likely that your opponent will be able to space and disengage from the fight. And in fact, if you do win the brawl because of your purge, it's also more likely that they will actually want to do that. On the other hand, if you use your purge specifically to limit your opponent's mobility by taking away some of their kiting tools, then they will be stronger in the brawl and there is a higher risk that they will be able to simply trade with you and kill you. This is what happened to those carving swords that purged my boots earlier. It's of course up to you to figure out which risk you want to take in which fight. This video should help you make this decision more consciously. If you are not sure, then I suggest that you use all your resources, including your purge, in order to win the brawl. Winning trades is more important than being able to catch your enemy. And it also puts more pressure on your opponent, which makes it more likely that they will end up making mistakes and you get the kill. Let's come back to this choice and look at it from the perspective of the person playing against the purge. But first, let's quickly check out this fight. This carving uses absolutely everything right away and instantly purges my Inferno shield to prevent me from fighting back. He has made a choice. He is prioritizing winning the brawl, and he's giving me a chance to run away and disengage. I can easily click my boots here and reset this fight. But my ego gets in the way and I decide to try to outplay him instead. This is exactly what I just talked about. If you focus on winning the brawl, it's more likely that your opponent will make mistakes. And in this case, I forget about his low cooldown tenacity jacket and end up making a donation. So how can you use this if you're playing against the purge? Number one, the first lesson, which we talked about earlier, you must give your opponent this choice. If you click all your buttons at the same time and it all gets purged, you will lose. Lesson 2 of playing against a purge is that you are sometimes able to bait out your enemy's purge by using your less important spells first. If you have important spells in your build that can be purged, then consider holding on to them for later stages of the fight. And if you're listening to me and thinking, well, that idea sucks, I can't just not use my Inferno Shield or Mercenary Jacket simply because my enemy has a purge, then you are starting to understand why I believe that purge is the strongest spell in solo PvP in Albion Online. Let's look at a couple more examples. There are 3 things that I might want to purge in this fight: his Mercenary Jacket, his Thunder Armor, so his Q, and his boots. But I have a question for you. Tell me if you think this is a good moment for the Deathgivers to use their Mercenary Jacket. I'll give you a couple quick seconds to think about it. The answer is a clear no. This is a bad time for him to use a Mercenary Jacket. Refer back to the first rule of playing against a purge. You need to give your opponent a choice. He knows on Deathgivers that if he clicks his Mercenary Jacket right now, I'm going to instantly use my Helmet of Valor. And if that happens, I will get rid of 2 of the most important tools that he has to win this trade, which is his Mercenary Jacket and the stacks from his Q, which allow him to use his E and potentially kill me. By not using his Mercenary Jacket, he forces me to choose. Either I purge the stacks to deny him the E, but then he has a free Mercenary Jacket, or I keep my purge for his Mercenary Jacket, but then he gets 3 stacks and can E. I choose to purge the stacks in hopes that he will not be able to react to it in time and still E, but he reacts well and it ends up being a very close fight. Here's one that I know you will enjoy because this is against dual swords. The fight starts very well for me. I am somehow lucky enough to dodge both his W and his E. But this does not mean that the fight is won for me, by no means. Dual swords can brawl very well, but this purge here is the nail in the coffin of my opponent. There is no reason for him to purge my boots, and as you should already know after this video, if you are not sure that you're going to win the brawl, which he absolutely should not be after missing all of his spells, then prioritize winning the brawl and don't worry so much about your opponent's kiting or mobility. After he wastes his purge, I know that I can remove his jacket, but he cannot remove mine, so I can pretty much just hit him with everything until he dies. This spear starts the fight very well by hitting a lot more spells than me, but he is using a borderline useless Hunter Hood while I'm using the Helmet of Valor. This means that I can use my Inferno Shield whenever I want and probably get a lot of value out of, while he has to be ready that whenever he uses it, I will just purge it. He plays well, but does not adapt to the fact that I have a purge, and this costs him the fight. He needed to do one of 2 things in order to give him a better chance to win here. Option 1, to use his Inferno and then instantly E through me in hopes that I will react to his Inferno and miss my Helmet of Valor. Option 2 is to at least use his Inferno when he has 0 spear stacks, so as to not lose both the shield as well as his Q stacks. Repetition is the mother of skill, so let's look at another carving with Fiend Cull. As always, no matter what I do, this man is going to purge something. So I have a choice. Do I want to brawl or do I want to kite and potentially disengage? I know that there are even some exceptionally good players that still think that spear is just a kiting weapon. This is not true, especially with Roast Snapper against Eel Stew. I am very happy to take this brawl. If you've been paying attention, then you can probably already guess the next thing that I'm going to do. I use my boots first, hoping that he will purge them, and the plan works. So now I am free to turn on my Inferno Shield and try to brawl. Now, if I'd known that he will just stand and hit me back, I would have kept my Stalker Hood. But as it stands, I mess up my execute, so he gets away in Undead Cape. But we get another nice example of using the Purge and playing against a Purge. Remember, if you are not sure who trades better, prioritize using your items, including your Purge, in order to win the brawl. And when fighting enemies who have a purge, apply the two strategies that we discussed. And don't forget that the most satisfying feeling in Albion PvP is the feeling of getting better. See ya!